My sister conceived a child with my spouse while residing with us, and now she expects me to depart so they can become a family unit. But she feels wronged because my husband doesn't have any assets to his name. I'm 34 years old, and a few months back I allowed my sister, Yuli, who is 28, to come live with me because she was in a really bad financial spot. Yuli had been let go from her job when the business closed down, and just 2 weeks later she got seriously ill with West Nile virus. After talking it over with my folks, I thought it would be okay for her to stay with me for a few weeks so I could look after her, keep an eye on her getting better, and help her save money on rent because it seemed certain that she wouldn't be able to get back to work soon. She was at her lowest point, and I was the one who offered her a helping hand because our parents live far away, and she doesn't really have many friends who could support her. I felt certain that it was the proper course of action, helping a family member or friend in their hour of need, but how did she show her appreciation? By getting involved with my husband. Adding insult to injury, she had the audacity to suggest that I move out so they could establish their joyful family, because she's now carrying his baby. This whole situation came to my attention a few days ago. Yuli wanted my husband and me to sit down because she had something important to share with us. I was hoping she would finally leave, as she had been doing better recently. I figured she was going to tell us that she was ready to start working again and wouldn't need to live with us anymore. Instead, she dropped the devastating news. She and my spouse had been carrying on a secret relationship for a few weeks, and now she was expecting a child. Looking at my husband, I could see he was just as stunned as I was. It was obvious Yuli hadn't discussed this bombshell with him before telling me. That made so much sense. After announcing she was pregnant with my husband's child, she added that she knew this might be a lot to take in and was truly sorry for what had occurred. But she said, "What's happened has happened, and you can't go back in time." Then, with unbelievable nerve, she asked me to move out of the house since she'd be uncomfortable with me around in her situation. I was absolutely livid, but I kept my composure. In a quiet tone, I told her I wouldn't be going anywhere because the house was mine. If anyone needed to leave, it was her, and she could take my unfaithful husband with her. They could go build their perfect little family wherever they pleased because I was going to file for divorce, and I never wanted to see either of them again. I talked as calmly as I could, keeping my fury in check, and managed the situation with as much self-respect as I could muster. They had already caught me off guard, so I wasn't going to let them see me fall apart. After I told her this was my house and I wasn't leaving, she seemed to think I was kidding. But then my husband spoke up and confirmed that I wasn't joking. He clarified that he didn't own anything, which seemed to be a surprise to Yuli. It turned out he'd been lying to her about everything. We've been together for 8 years, and we've been married for the last 5 of those. It was a few months after we got hitched that I took a chance and launched my own company. Fortunately, it flourished, so my spouse and I agreed it would be great if he stayed home and focused on his writing, something he'd always been passionate about. He spent the past 4 years dedicated to his novel while also handling all the chores around the house. We don't have children, so there wasn't a whole lot that needed to be done. The house and everything inside were mine because I'd purchased them, and we'd both agreed that it was best for me to own everything. I'm guessing he's regretting that decision right about now. When my husband confessed to Yuli that he didn't actually own anything and had been dishonest, she completely lost it. She began screaming at him, calling him a fake and a cheat, and insisting she'd been deceived. I found a certain pleasure in seeing her lose her composure with him, though at that instant I wasn't concerned with their problems. I just wanted them to leave my place. I had to step in and tell them to cease the shouting match because I wanted them to leave right now. I wasn't going to give them time to slowly pack. I just wanted them out of my sight. My husband, to his credit, understood there was no way he could talk his way out of this situation. He knew how much I valued my own sense of self-worth and pride, and he knew I could never excuse an affair, so he quietly walked into our bedroom and began gathering his things. Yule, however, got down on her knees and began to plead with me to forgive her. I knew she'd promised to do whatever it took to make things right, but she also needed a place to live and couldn't be kicked out, particularly since she was carrying my nephew. Thinking about family made me see red. I took hold of her arm, helped her stand up, and shoved her out the door. I wasn't gentle, but frankly, I didn't care at that moment. I was absolutely boiling with anger. It just enraged me that she had the nerve to consider us family after she'd slept with my husband. She continued to weep and plead on the porch, but I slammed the door shut. Then I went into the guest room, haphazardly stuffed all her belongings into her suitcases and tossed them outside. I warned her to leave or I would dial 911. She kept sobbing, but I simply closed the door and returned inside. Soon after, my husband appeared with his luggage, offering numerous apologies. I acted like I hadn't heard him. Yuli kept crying and pleading outside on the porch for roughly an hour after he departed, but I put on my headphones and blocked her out. Finally, I became aware of the quiet and understood that she was finally gone. That evening, I phoned my attorney, related everything that had occurred, and stated that I wished to file for divorce. I intended to inform my relatives and friends later, however. The following day I received a call from my mom and dad. They said what I had done was awful. In their view, I'd been unkind and thoughtless towards Yule, who had been dealing with a lot recently. I thought this was odd because my parents had always treated all of us the same. Yuli was definitely not their favorite. However, when they began to take her side, it didn't sit right with me at all. I was informed about my sister's pregnancy, and they told me I couldn't just throw her out, particularly given her circumstances. She was unemployed and recuperating from a major illness. They mentioned she needed time to get back on track. Plus, according to them, no one else was around to provide her with the level of care that I could. Her friends were all preoccupied with their own financial problems, jobs, and families, so they couldn't assist her. My parents insisted that, as her sibling, the least I could do was overlook her poor choices and support her. Additionally, they brought up the fact that it was my spouse who had initially lured her in, not the other way around. He supposedly told her that he handled our finances and was a successful writer of novels and film scripts. Apparently, he didn't want to be famous, so he remained anonymous. My sister, being gullible, believed everything and thought he was someone important. That's why she was taken in by his deception. However, the situation got even more complicated. She admitted she'd been romantically involved with him and that they had hoped to push me out of the house as a team. Sadly for them, their plan went sideways, particularly since they didn't even manage to get their stories straight. When she confessed everything, she completely destroyed their strategy. Therefore, I didn't budge. I asked, "What sister? I don't have a sister." Then I contended that I absolutely had the right to evict her because she had chosen to betray me with my husband. It wasn't relevant whether he played a role too. Both of them made the same choice to betray me. It didn't make sense to let her stay while kicking him out, acting like everything was normal. Her pregnancy and joblessness didn't sway my decision. I'd already factored those in before I let her live with me for months. And how did she show her gratitude? By sleeping with my husband right here in my own house. Besides, it's not like she was extremely far along and helpless. She was only carrying the baby for a short while. Even if she were ready to give birth, I still would have made her leave because her actions were repulsive. She was prepared to toss me out when she wrongly believed my husband owned the house, so I think this is karma. But my parents kept saying I was too tough. They dwelled on how I responded, not on her terrible betrayal. The constant arguing became exhausting, and I just ended the call. We haven't talked since. Do you think I did the wrong thing by kicking my pregnant sister out of my home? I know some people think kicking a pregnant woman out is awful, but letting her stay after what happened would have been crazy. Thankfully, most people believe I was being fair and that she deserved to find other accommodations. Yesterday, I blocked my parents on my phone. This whole thing has really taken a massive emotional chunk out of me, but I can't slack off from my job. I'm the person in charge, so I have to put on a brave face and deal with everything. At the office, everything's normal, but when I get home, I fall apart. This emotional distress is too much to bear. The divorce paperwork was submitted by my attorney and me a couple of days back. My soon-to-be ex will be officially notified soon, and I doubt he'll fight it. He's familiar enough with me to know I won't give him an easy way out if he attempts to. Yet, while I feel secure in my choice, it still causes me pain. Getting the divorce won't instantly resolve everything. I'm stunned that after 8 years as a couple, he would deceive me by getting involved with my sister. I truly believed we were in love, destined to spend our lives together. Now I'm questioning everything about our past. Perhaps this wasn't his initial infidelity. It could be that this is the first time he was found out. That realization crushes me. However, there's nothing left for me to do except come to terms with it and attempt to move on. He's the sole person who hasn't tried to reach out to me since I made him leave. My folks and Yuli did, but only to persuade me to let her stay again without charge. It's unbelievable that my parents are supporting her. In a previous writing, I discussed how my parents always treated Yuli and me in the same way. Now I have some doubt about that. I didn't have very high hopes for Yuli. We weren't the closest of friends, but our relationship wasn't bad either. That's the reason I said yes to helping her and letting her live here. We had an extra bedroom, and I figured, why not? My folks also urged me, and I thought that's just what families do. Still, I never anticipated her betrayal. It stings when someone you've been assisting for months betrays your trust. With my parents, it's even tougher to accept. Because they've always had a reputation for being decent and just, I thought they'd be angry at Yuli. To be honest, they were. Based on what we talked about, it was obvious they didn't agree with her choices, but they kept emphasizing that the harm was already done and that we needed to put it behind us. I can't figure out what's come over them, but I am seriously let down. It feels like I've lost all the admiration I once had for them, and I'm not certain I can ever get it back. I'm emotionally exhausted. My mind is solely on my job at the moment because my personal life has totally crumbled. I haven't even confided in my friends about this situation yet, although I know I'll have to at some point. My spouse and I have a lot of the same friends, and I'd prefer they get the facts from me instead of whatever version he might come up with. At this moment, I don't know what to anticipate from anyone anymore. Currently, I'm making 2 things my priority: making sure my work doesn't suffer and managing the divorce process. I'm pretty sure my husband won't fight it. I've been equitable with the agreement, but there's always a possibility of a surprise. so I'm gathering all the necessary paperwork just in case something comes up. Other than that, I'm attempting to keep my thoughts as clear as possible. The last thing I want is to start a downward spiral. Expressing myself here has really helped. I am truly grateful for everyone who has gotten in touch, left comments, and given their support. It means more to me than words can convey. He sent me a text saying that he thought the conditions were reasonable. In another text, he confessed he had been trying to find a way to say he was sorry, yet nothing felt right to him. Everything he thought of sounded lame and fake. Therefore, he decided just to say it, he was sorry. He clarified that he misled Yuli because he wanted to make a good impression on her. It was because he was feeling like he wasn't enough, as if he had nothing, dependent on me financially, and not even having children made him feel like he had no reason to keep going. His book wasn't coming together, and he felt as if he'd thrown away 4 years of his life working on something that was going nowhere. That dissatisfaction morphed into depression, though he couldn't bring himself to acknowledge it, let alone talk to me about it. Then Yuli entered the picture. Without considering how morally corrupt it was, he began lying to her to inflate his own sense of self-worth. He pretended to be in charge of our finances and doing well in his profession. Ultimately, it led to them being intimate. He believed it would be a single misstep, yet it spun out of control. Despite feeling guilty, he was unable to stop. It morphed into his method for avoiding everything that was wrong with his life. When Yuli became pregnant and our argument occurred, it all crumbled. He said he profoundly regretted everything. He acknowledged he destroyed what we had and swore this was the single time he'd been unfaithful. He pleaded with me to believe him and held out hope that sometime in the future I could forgive him. After reading that message, I wept. It was one more memory of all I'd lost. I believed I understood this person. I was convinced our connection was strong, founded on love. However, everything crumbled in just one day. The loss of that trust is heartbreaking, and I'm certain anyone who has experienced a divorce or a betrayal can relate to this pain. A part of me wanted to despise him, to concentrate on all the awful things he's done, but in the end, it still aches. I loathed myself for tearing up over his message, but when I was done, I found the resolve to block him. I offered no reply. He didn't warrant a response, especially not at this moment when the wound is so fresh. After some time, I began to feel even more enraged by the things he had said. All he had to do was have a conversation with me. I never, not even once, made him feel guilty for deciding to stay home and work on his novel. I'm not especially imaginative. I've never been interested in writing or similar things, but now I suppose I am, since I have to get all of this off my chest. Nevertheless, I honored his artistic side. I didn't think there was anything wrong with him staying home. Perhaps his easily wounded male ego couldn't cope. Perhaps other people made remarks and he simply became resentful. But after 8 years of being together, the very least he could have done was tell me what was happening. We got married to support one another, and I would have supported him. We might have been able to resolve things, but he chose not to. He relied on Yuli instead, and that's how this whole disaster came to be. The more I consider it, the more repulsive and pitiable it appears. He was dishonest about so many things just to elevate his status. It's truly sad. I adored him for who he actually was. Yet that wasn't sufficient for him. I'll never comprehend this. With Yuli, at least I get her intentions. She wanted my life without putting in any work. She believed she could achieve that by getting pregnant and moving in with my wealthy, as they called him, spouse. However, now I can simply choose to disregard her entirely. In a few months, the divorce will be finalized, and then I won't ever need to see or even think about him again. It's update number 3. A few days have gone by since I last updated you, and I'd experienced a few tranquil days. But this morning, my parents unexpectedly arrived at my home. It was strange because since they relocated to my dad's hometown to oversee the family enterprise with my uncle, they rarely visit. It used to be that Yule and I were the ones who had to travel to see them. The fact that they flew here to see me signified something important. However, I knew they were only here to discuss Yuli. So when I opened the door, I told them straight. If they were here to talk about her, I did not want to. There's only one Sunday each week, and I wasn't going to squander mine revisiting the same subject. I'd already expressed everything that needed to be said, and they had too. There was nothing more left to talk about regarding this. I made it explicitly clear that they could only come inside if they apologized to me first. They had 2 options, apologize or depart. I stood my ground. I set my boundary. It was abundantly evident to me what they were doing, but Mom and Dad maintained their visit was solely to discuss Yuli. They felt we needed to resolve this because I was acting inappropriately toward her and toward them. They brought up the idea that we were family and families handled conflict in distinct ways. They began yet again with this whole family spiel, and just like with Yuli, I completely lost my cool. That's just not how families should behave, not if you ask me, not the kind of family I would ever desire to be a part of. I'll hand it to them though, in asterisk this family, we absolutely approach things in a unique way. My sister sleeps with my spouse and I removed her from my home. That's definitely not the typical family dynamic. I presented everything to them in plain terms. They attempted to stumble over their words and come up with excuses, but I didn't give them the opportunity. I just completely overwhelmed every point they could have raised. When I finished, my mom was sobbing, but it was my place and I could speak to them exactly as I chose, particularly since they chose to invade my space this morning. The whole argument should have been directed towards Yule, who was the one who actually committed a wrong, not me. Once I was finished ranting, my mother was weeping uncontrollably, to the point where my dad declared he never wanted to speak to me again. He called me a terrible daughter for causing my own mother, the woman who brought me into this world, to cry, but I was indifferent. They can believe I'm insane if they want to. I know I'm not, and that is all that matters to me. If anybody's truly disturbed, it's them or my sister, and realistically, perhaps all three of them. Another update. It's been roughly 30 days since my last report. I haven't spoken to any of my family members, including Yuli, and certainly not my mom and dad. All I'm aware of is that they've been giving her financial assistance. Regarding my soon-to-be ex-husband, a couple of people have told me he's currently living with his folks. After the divorce is completely settled, he intends to relocate to a different state. Before you wonder, I have no idea what he plans to do regarding his child. At this moment, most of our mutual friends are very aware of the situation, and most of them have started distancing themselves from him. A few are attempting to stay impartial, choosing not to take sides. As for myself, my life is steadily improving. I'm going to do whatever is required to safeguard my sense of tranquility from now on. I'm not exactly feeling joyful just yet, but at least I'm calm, which is a significant upgrade compared to how I felt last month. Gradually, I'm certain I'll experience happiness again. Ultimately, unpleasant experiences always reach a conclusion eventually. This update is pretty current because some developments have come up that you may want to be aware of. My sister unfortunately lost the baby and has been placing the blame on me. In her opinion, the stress I caused led to her miscarriage. My parents are also participating in this with her. The upside is that they're not contacting me personally. This information is all coming from people who claim to be unbiased, but they somehow managed to accuse me of causing the death of a baby because of my behavior. However, it's amusing. None of these individuals have offered my sister a place to live, so by their standards, they're just as responsible as I am. If I'm being honest, my sister wouldn't be in this mess if she hadn't slept with someone else's spouse, especially not her own sister's, or at the very least used some form of barrier. Honestly, there's nothing ordinary about this whole scenario. Yet I've found that when the criticisms come from people who are this unstable, it isn't worth my effort or attention. It's update number 6. My former husband reached out to me just a few hours ago, and it's wild what he told me. Nope, he didn't ask me to reconsider. Our split wasn't awful, all things considered, which is why I even replied. He confessed he made some errors and thankfully made the divorce proceedings pretty easy. I'm not holding a grudge against him, not because he merits it, but because I won't waste my energy on resentment or thinking about him. No unfaithful person is worth all that. What he revealed to me, though, was pretty intriguing. He confirmed that my sister was never expecting. He phoned me to let me know because he'd heard all the stuff people were saying about me and wanted me to get the real story. He also gave those people the same update. Apparently, he kept pushing her for proof of the pregnancy and even offered to go to a doctor's visit with her repeatedly. Every single time, she found a way to get out of it. Finally, she reported she'd lost the baby. Whenever he requested something tangible, she couldn't produce anything. He also spoke with my folks and they had nothing either. There's absolutely no documentation showing that she was ever pregnant or that she miscarried. She simply, out of the blue, announced she'd had a miscarriage, and that was the end of it. I'm not affected by the blame people are putting on me, suggesting I caused my sister to miscarry. My folks have reached out, hoping we can patch things up, and they've even cut off her money now that it's clear they won't be grandparents. But frankly, it's just not enough, and it's come too late. I really don't care what my parents do with my sister anymore. What I truly needed was their backing back when I was wronged, the kind of encouragement any decent parent would offer to a child in my situation. So it's a big no for my parents, too. Ultimately, my sister ended up losing a sibling, a place to live, and my assistance because she chose to sleep with my husband, plus she faked a pregnancy. My parents lost a daughter because they valued a lie over the true story. I'm of the opinion that they should all go to Vegas and roll the dice. Maybe gambling will be a better fit for them than being a family.